All right, so today we're talking about evolution, but this is a new tactic about teaching you guys how to actually approach people that talk about evolution, that support it, that are trying to convince you or someone you know, someone you're trying to, persuade not to, believe in evolution. So, standard operating, if you've been here before, this is standard for me, okay? Why do kids walk away from the faith in such high numbers today? It's because they don't believe in God. Why don't they believe in God? They don't believe in God because they don't believe the Bible's true. They don't believe the Bible's true because evolution has proven the Bible untrue. God could not create the animals, he could not create man if evolution did it. Okay, I'm not getting into any doctrinal things about how God did evolution or any of that. We're just talking about evolution. So I'm not making a doctrinal statement. I'm just saying that evolution doesn't make sense. And I'll show you why here in a second. All right, so who in here likes math? Okay, great. This is going to be your night because we're going to talk about the evolution equation. Okay, the evolution equation is natural selection plus mutation plus time. Okay, now there's no numbers, so sorry, kind of a trick question. It's not really math, but natural selection, okay, plus mutation plus time. We'll get into those words. Don't worry about it if you don't mean them right now. All right, so why does evolution take billions of years? Evolution takes billions of years because basically mutations are these tiny little changes in your DNA. So what evolution says, they say, okay, there are these there's billions of characters in your DNA, billions of letters, like in computer code, billions of characters that you can change one thing, and that's a mutation, it's a change, right? But to create billions of letters, you need to have changes over a humongous amount of time if they're small, which mutations are small. That's why they say evolution takes a long time. Now, a little bit into mutations, although it's not important for today, there are good mutations, there are neutral mutations, and there are bad mutations. Okay, an example of a good mutation could be something like a rabbit changing its hair color from like brown to white, and it happens to be in a snowy environment, so it blends into its environment. That would be considered a good mutation. A neutral mutation is eye color. Okay, your eye color changes, right? Your parents can have brown eyes, you can have green eyes. It really doesn't affect you at all, right? You just have different color eyes, right? Bad mutations. Bad mutations can be something like genetic disorders or any such disorder that can cause you to live a not as full life as a normal person with healthy genetics, right? But enough about that. We're not going to talk too much about mutation today. All you need to know is that mutations in evolution are said to create entirely new products out of old products. So for example, right, a mutation change would be something like, okay, we're going to change the Hobbit into the Chronicles of Narnia. Okay, how long would it take to change every word in The Hobbit to every word in the Chronicles of Narnia? It would take forever, okay? It would take millions of years if you changed one letter every week. No, probably not that long. Anywho, I don't know how many words are in any of them. Point is, it would take a super long time to change all the words in The Hobbit to the words in Narnia. That's the point that evolution is trying to make. They say billions of years of mutation created everything in life. Right? Because we know DNA changes letters, and we know there's a lot of time. Right? That's what they'll say. So they said, well then, we can change it into whatever we want. We can even change it into a philosophy book. Right? From a bacteria, which is the Hobbit, to a humongous philosophy book, which is us. Right? Point is, mutations change letters, chapters, words into other letters, chapters, and words. Okay? In essence, they're changes. So when I say mutation, all it means is just a change. Don't worry about it. It was confusing, but I had to say it. Okay, change. That's all mutation is. Don't now throw everything out the window with mutation. You don't need any more. Okay, changes happen. That's all you need to know. All right, natural selection. Okay, Star Wars fan. Okay, I'm going to tell you one of the biggest traps that they will try to trap Christians in. Okay, they will try to convince you that microevolution is true. Okay, they say, oh, macro evolution, that's what evolutionists believe, but microevolution, you can obviously see that, right? Microevolution, or evolution on a small scale. I can prove it to you right now. What kind of dog breed do you have? What kind of cat breed do you have, right? There are hundreds of them, and there are thousands of mutts, right? So of course, animals can change on a small scale. That's just the micro scale, okay? What's the difference, right, between micro and macro? Because they'll say that microevolution is just adaptation. Like, obviously, look at it. Microevolution, just evolution, small evolution, baby evolution. They'll get you to commit to that step. And once they say, okay, Christians, can you at least agree that evolution on a small scale happens? You say yes, and you say, okay, well, actually, microevolution plus time equals macroevolution. In other words, tiny changes over a long period of time add up to big changes. And they got you. Unless you somehow prove that they don't have as much time as they need. You should have been here last week for dating methods to learn that. But point is, don't believe microevolution, okay? That's not the right word. The right word is natural selection. Or another word for natural selection is survival of the fittest. Okay? Don't ever use their terminology of microevolution. Microevolution is not true. That's just a word they try to use to have you commit to tiny evolution, and then they'll just tack on time, and they will force you to say, okay, if you're going to be logical, if there's time, then you believe in evolution. You just don't know it yet, Christians. So don't believe microevolution. Okay, moving on. So survival of the fittest, what the heck am I talking about here? Again, take natural selection, throw it out the window. You don't need it anymore. What you need to know is survival of the fittest. That's another word for natural selection, another word for microevolution. These are all just different words for the same things. Okay, so only focus on survival of the fittest. What is it? Okay, nature doesn't do anything. Okay, so when they say natural selection or nature selects and nature evolves and nature forces animals to evolve, that's not true. Nature can't do anything. Nature just exists. Okay, nature isn't fiddling with animals. Okay, that's not how it works, obviously, okay? There isn't some mother nature out there, in her workshop making new animals and popping them out of her factory. No, okay? Nature doesn't do anything, okay? What we're talking about is, okay, whatever survives, pass on its DNA, obviously. If you survive, right, or if a dog survives and it has baby puppies, it passes on its genetic code to those baby puppies. Okay? It passes on its changes. Don't even talk about DNA. It passes its changes on to its puppies, right? So if the parent doesn't survive, can it pass on its changes? No. So are those changes beneficial to that dog if it doesn't help them to survive? No. That's what they're saying. They're saying, basically, yep, whatever survives, survives. That's the grandiose evolution, right? That's all it really is. Okay, they say whatever survives, survives. And that is the biggest thing that they'll try to convince you of. Whatever survives, survives, therefore evolution. Okay? So, survival of the fittest simply means whatever can exist in its environment, whatever is not food for another animal, whatever can get food and not starve to death, and whatever can pass on its changes to its offspring, that survives, that passes on. Alrighty. So, again, sorry, inundating you with a lot of information at the beginning. Keep up with me. We're going to slow down here in a little bit. Okay, mutation. Again, like I said, don't worry about mutations. All mutations are just changes. Changes, 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 changes. Any change, we'll just chalk up. Don't worry about mutation. Don't worry about good, bad, or neutral right now. Just think of changes. Animals change, obviously. They will say, look at the dog, look at the rabbit, look at the birds, look at Darwin's finches. They change, therefore evolution. Okay, that's what they'll say. Okay, I'm going to show you why that's wrong here in a second. But all you have to know is that changes, survival of the fittest, and time. And consequently, that is the new formula. So, the new formula, and this is the formula that matters. You can forget about the other formula. This is the only formula that matters. Survival of the fittest plus change plus time. Now, what does this mean? Okay, well, let's suppose that Mr. Monkey here, right, had a change happen to him. Okay? Now, evolution says that change is filtered out by survival of the fittest. That basically, okay, does that change make the monkey better? Yes, because it got smarter. It started evolving into a human. Since it got smarter, it's better. And since it's better, it will survive more often than the dumb apes, right? Maybe the dumb apes, eat rotten things, and the smart ape doesn't. Okay, the smart ape will survive more than the dumb ape. That makes sense, right? And they say that plus time equals evolution. But what I'm going to show to you, and this is the end of the inundation session, right? No more information dumping, okay? All we're going to be talking about today is survival of the fittest. We're going to say, okay, does survival of the fittest actually support evolution? Okay, so what is survival of the fittest? Again, an example. So survival of the fittest says, okay, you have a dog. So you have two dogs. You have a dog with long fur and you have a dog with short fur, okay? Now, which dog survives in Alaska? The long fur. Why? Keeps them warmer. It helps. Yeah, exactly. You're not going to freeze to death. You're going to be warmer, so you don't have to, eat as much, right? Your metabolism would be lower. All these different scientific mumbo jumbo. But common sense is more warmth in cold climates. Okay, who would be the better dog in a hot climate?
What kind of a dog is that?
I actually have no idea. I'm not good with this dog breed, but I know that's probably a husky or a husky hybrid, one of the two. Right? Anyway, short hair dog. Okay? It would survive better in a hot climate. Why? Because its climate is what makes it, the change. Okay, so is long hair or short hair, just forget their climates, okay? Is long hair or short hair better?
Don't know.
Nobody knows because we don't know the climate, right? So if we don't know if it's hot or cold, you can't say if one's better than the other one. See? So what evolution will try to say is they'll say, okay, there was an environment, right, that had them evolve, right? They'll say an environment caused animal X to evolve. What they're saying is the environment, the long hair survives in the cold environment. That's all they're really saying, okay? But again, they use a bunch of scientific mumbo jumbo, okay? Again, the dog which has longer fur is more fit in a snowy environment, okay? Now, here's the kicker. Changes that help the dog to survive are kept by default. Why? Because the others are dead. Okay? The white rabbits in Alaska that can blend in with the snow are not dead because they're not eaten by the hawk or the eagle or the fox or the wolf, right? The brown-haired rabbits in Alaska, they're lunch. Why? Because they can't blend in, they can't hide. Okay? That is survival of the fittest. Okay? Whatever helps the animal to survive, they survive. That's it. Simple. Alrighty, moving on. So here's the recap of everything so far. Evolution does not equal natural selection. Okay? So when we say natural selection, when we say survival of the fittest, this does not mean evolution. Remember the formula, okay? Survival of the fittest plus change plus time, right? If change happens, does that mean evolution is true? No. If just survival of the fittest is true, does that mean mutation? Does that mean evolution is true? No. If there's a long period of time, if there's eons of time, if the Earth is actually 4.2 billion years old, does that mean evolution's true? No, it's a combination of all three. So all we have to do is demonstrate that one of these do not agree with evolution. The one we're picking for today is survival of the fittest. Okay, so according to evolutionary science, according to evolution, all animals are products of this equation. So this equation works for every animal that has ever existed, period. I'm going to show and demonstrate how they say survival of the fittest causes changes to work towards evolution. I'm going to say, actually, what evolutionary history says happened is wrong because survival of the fittest actually disagrees with evolution. So think about it like survival of the fittest and evolution are enemies for this discussion.
And they always get us to think that it supports it.
Yes, they get us to think that it supports evolution, where in reality it doesn't support it, and I'll show you why here in a second. But first we have to talk about a burden. Okay, as Christians, what's our job for evolution? What are we trying to do? Well, since evolution needs all animals and features to have an advantage, right? If survival of the fittest drives evolution, then every animal, every feature in every animal must give that animal an advantage. Okay? So the reason why you have arms is because they give you an advantage. The reason you have eyes is because they give you advantage over things that have no eyes. Does that make sense? Everything you have, every finger, every hair, everything in your DNA is there because at some point it gave you an advantage.
From evolution.
That's what evolution says. Yes, that everything that you have is a product of, it had to give you some advantage over someone else, and that's why you have it, right? The white fur rabbits over the dark fur rabbits in Alaska. That's what I'm saying, right? Okay, we'll just say, quick example. Okay, what's better, humans or apes? Humans. Why? Why are humans better than apes? Smarter, because humans make guns, because humans have tanks, right? The apes don't stand a chance, right? So what's objectively better? Humans. Okay, and they'll say, look, humans versus ape, right? The reason you have intelligence is because your intelligence gave you a bonus over the apes. And that's why the Neanderthals are extinct and humans exist. Because the humans are smarter than the Neanderthals. Okay, that's what they'll say in their PBS documentaries. Okay, I'm going to stop right here. Does that make sense for everybody? Is there anything that I said that didn't make any sense so far? I know I went really fast. All right. So here's what we're going to do. To disprove evolution, we need to show that the required changes don't make the animals more fit. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, evolution, if you ever look at a textbook in evolution, they say that we started with tiny bacteria and went all the way to humans. So evolution needs to prove, okay, bacteria had to exist. It had to evolve this to turn into a bigger bacteria. That bigger bacteria had to exist and change to become, a tiny fish. And that tiny fish had to exist and evolve to become a bigger fish to amphibian, amphibian to reptile, reptile to bird, reptile to also mammals, mammals to other mammals, mammals to monkeys, monkeys to humans. Okay, they need to prove that every animal that exists came into existence by what? Survival of the fittest. That's what they need to prove. Okay, we don't have to do that as Christians. What we have to do is just find one example or one case where it breaks this rule, right? Because what happens if survival of the fittest would not let, human come into existence? What if we tested and say, okay, the human should never have come into existence? What would that mean for evolution? It's not true, because if we're using their formula, and the formula doesn't add up in the end, what does that mean? That means the formula's wrong. That means the formula's not true. That's what we're doing. We're taking their formula and we're saying, okay, Mr. Evolutionist, you say this is true, we'll test it. Okay, and we'll get into the tests here in just a tiny bit. Okay, evolutionary science must prove, I just said that. Okay, so for example, right, does evolution of a heart make the animal better? Right? So if you've ever heard Ray Comfort's videos, he'll say something like, what evolved first, the heart, the blood vessels, or the blood? And the evolutionist was like, I don't know, maybe the heart. And he said, okay, that's great. What's the heart going to pump? Or where is it going to pump to? Right? Because does the evolution of a heart by itself give a fish any advantage? Not really. That's what we're discussing. We're saying, okay, let's pick the easiest and most damaging examples, right? And the most fun examples, right? To say, okay, it would not give you an advantage. A heart should never have come into existence because there is no advantage for the heart. Why? Because small changes over time can get you a heart, but the heart won't be effective because it has nothing to pump and nothing to pump where, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So evolution is backwards. So here's how the evolutionists reason. They say, okay, so we know what exists today. We know that legs, hearts, feathers, long necks in giraffes, lizards, snakes, we know those all exist today, right? So obviously, if I'm role-playing as an evolutionist right now, obviously they had to evolve somehow and get to this point, right? That's what they think. That's their starting point, okay? Then they say, every animal and feature has an advantage. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist due to survival of the fittest. Okay, this is their equation now. They say, okay, long neck on a giraffe exists. Okay, well, if our equation is true, if evolution is true, there must be a reason why that long neck exists. And the reason is it must have given the giraffe some kind of bonus points. Okay, that's why the giraffe has a long neck. Okay, they look at what exists and its advantages now, and then they create a story about how that animal or feature could have evolved. So if you've ever looked in a history book or ever looked at giraffes, they say, okay, the giraffe, it has a long neck. Why? Well, giraffes can eat really high up into trees. So maybe the giraffe stretched its neck over a long period of time, and its neck got longer and longer and longer, and that allowed them to eat the higher up in the trees where no other animal could eat. And that gave them the advantage they needed to, okay, so all the short giraffes died because they starved to death, and all the long neck giraffes survived because they could eat the top of the trees. That's the reasoning they'll use. Okay? And then, since they already think, since they're evolutionists, that the feature exists, and evolution created it, they don't need to explain if it's possible, because they already believe it's possible. What they do in these textbooks is they try to explain how. So do they ever talk about, well, does the neck really follow the rules of evolution and survival of the fittest? Right? Do you read that in textbooks? No, they say, well, scientists may, scientists conclude that maybe the giraffe didn't reach its neck into the trees because it was eating, but because it was trying to compete with other males, right? Because I'm not sure if you know this, giraffes actually swing their necks around like humongous clubs to smack other giraffes to compete over females. That's how they compete, right? It looks really painful. Look them up on YouTube. Extremely painful, right? They just smack each other, right? Somehow they can do that, right? But they'll have all these different explanations about, well, maybe it's because, well, the longer neck giraffes could smack the other one harder. So the longer neck giraffes survived and could reproduce because they'd knock out all the short neck giraffes because they'd smack them upside the head hard enough, right? Whatever their reason may be, they have a reason why it's advantageous, right? They always talk about advantage, 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 right? Because why? Survival of the fittest drives evolution. If survival of the fittest doesn't agree with evolution, the whole theory collapses, right? Okie dokie. So, as Christians, we're going to say, okay, well, again, you math people, that was the question I asked in the beginning. Every equation, every math formula, every science formula, all forensics theories, all have theories, problems, equations that work both forwards and backwards. For example, you have x plus 2 equals 4. Okay, who can tell me what x is? 2, right? Because 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? All right? Now we switch it and make the equation backwards. We say, okay, 4 minus x equals 2. What's x? 2. Exactly. Right? No matter what numbers you switch, as long as you keep the rules consistent with mathematics, it will always end up being the same. Okay? Same thing with chemical formulas, right? So everything on the left side equals everything on the right side. Right? There is no loss. Right? However the chemists do that. It's a gift I do not have. Okay? However they do it, all the chemical formulas somehow balance. Right? In other words, nothing is lost, nothing's imagined. Right? They always work forwards and backwards. Right? And you can tell them, you can say, okay, if your theory is so grand, then will you be open to have your theory tested? And if you can get them to agree, we'll say, okay, we'll test your theory. We'll start working forwards. And here's how you're going to work forwards when talking to someone who agrees with evolution. Okay, and we say, okay, since all real science works forwards and backwards, we test evolution in the same way as we would mathematics or science. Okay, so if we're doing an algebra equation, right, we say, okay, x plus 2 equals 4. And we say, okay, I'm going to do a bunch of math mumbo jumbo, and I'm going to say x equals 3. Okay? And then Mr. Math teacher comes up and says, that's wrong. Oh, teacher, why is x being 3 wrong and x plus 2 equals 4? The teacher says, well, because 2 plus 3 doesn't equal 4. What did the teacher just do? The teacher plugged in what you answered as and tested it, plugged it back into the equation and said, okay, we're going to test it again. That's how you tell if your algebra equations are right or wrong, right? Beside the point. If you don't know algebra, basically, algebra is long for me. It was a long time ago for me too. Basically, we test it again. We say, okay, you have all these laws, right, that all your scientific mumbo jumbo, we will just say, okay, you say that the giraffe got a longer neck because it reached into trees or because it could smack the other giraffes harder. Let's test that theory. Let's start at the beginning and take step by step and see if your theory is correct. So what we're doing is we're testing their theories. Okay? Sorry, I already talked about all that. Alrighty. So the test. And here's the test. This is the important bit. Okay, evolution occurs slowly, step by step, over hundreds of thousands of years. Okay? So when they say, Neanderthal or all the different kinds of Neanderthal man or, Tiktaalik or all these different weird species that are extinct now that they say is in between, like Archaeopteryx, the dinosaur with feathers, or Lucy, the ape person, right? We talked about that last week as well, right? They'll say all these intermediate forms, right? They'll say, oh, Lucy's halfway between an ape and a man or ape and a human, right? And we know that Lucy was better than an ape because she could run. Okay, they're skipping a lot of steps, right? Because is Lucy around when apes are around? Okay, let me rephrase that. Did Lucy just pop out? Was there an ape that gave birth to Lucy? No. It was the ape's great, okay, a lot of greats. Grandchild. What I'm saying is evolution happens very slowly. So what you have to do is you say, okay, you can't say that because, sorry, lost my spot. Okay, so basically, to keep the change, any change, right? Long necks for giraffes, arms, legs, brains, fur, it has to make the animal more fit. Okay, that's the skinny of it. And we say, okay, but by that same logic, any change that is harmful to the animal, should that not kill them? Right? Wouldn't it there be like not survival of the fittest, but like dead of the weakest? Right? Extinction of the weakest? Because that's the same principle. Right? If the fittest survive, then what happens to the weakest?
The weakest die.
The weakest die. Right? So, as a Christian, you say, okay, death of the weakest or extinction of the weakest. Okay? Because if they agree to that, then we can say, okay, so you're telling me, Mr. Evolutionist, that for evolution to be true, every step from bacteria to man had to give some kind of advantage, otherwise the creature would die. And they'll say, yes. Okay, if you ask any scientist, that's what they'll say. Of course, they'll say, well, you see, and then prolong, like a paragraph or two, right? Point is, advantage, 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 advantage. That's what they'll say. As a Christian, we have to say, okay, no. The advantage does not lead where you think it'll lead. And again, I'm just setting the stage here. Example, rabbit camouflage, right? That's like the fur. I already talked about that. I'm sorry, I'm going ahead of the slides. Bear with me. Okay, so the curve. Any of you in here visual learners, this is your visual learning help. Okay, so this is called the curve, okay? Any decrease in a curve counts as a failure. So think about it this way. Evolution is a humongous staircase, okay? And the destination is, I don't know, the Empire State Building or something, right? In other words, a very long staircase, right? Now, to get to the Empire State Building, will you go upstairs or downstairs? Upstairs, right? Because to get to the Empire State Building, you need to go up, right? If you go down, you're not going to get there, right? In fact, if there's a staircase that goes down, no one will go along that staircase. Why? Because you're not going to where you're supposed to be going, right? And that's what this curve is. So basically, this curve, I'll just skip ahead here. For evolution to work, needs advantages. Advantages can be seen as going up, right? Think about the stock market. If it goes up, it means it has advantage. If it goes down, it means it has a loss, okay? So here are the two failure conditions, right, for our visual test. We say, okay, so if the animal, let's say a giraffe, if it getting a longer neck was actually a disadvantage, then we would go down, right? Because a disadvantage, that means the long neck doesn't actually mean the giraffe will survive. Maybe it, I don't know, maybe it just died for some reason if its neck got too long, right? It dies. That counts as failure. If the animal is weaker than its parents, it's a failure, right? In evolution, the children must be better than the parents for any progress to be made. Otherwise, they stay the same. The apes would never turn into humans if the baby apes were not better than the adult apes, or at least closer to humans, right? So that's what this indicates, the up and down. Okay, up means you're progressing, down means you're regressing. Okay, so the process. Here is the process by which you will use, you can use this process on any scenario ever, across any animal, any feature, anything. Okay, this is the process. Okay, first you need to ask the question, what is the transition? Ape to man, that's your transition. Okay, now that you know ape to man, what changes are necessary for that transition? Okay, well, ape to man, let's see. The ape it walks on 4 legs, it's strong, it has, it's got hair, right? It is, resilient, right? It doesn't overheat or, die of heat stroke as easy, right? It's more resilient in that regard. And then humans have intelligence, they're weaker, they can run on 2 legs, etc. So what you're basically saying is okay, what are the starting features and advantages? And then what are the ending features and advantages? So what we're saying is okay, what's our starting point and what's our ending point? Because what can we tell if we have a starting point and an ending point and we connect those dots with a line? What can we tell? We can tell the curve. We can tell, okay, is the ending point above or below the starting point? Or we can say, okay, does it do a weird, like a U shape, or like an N shape, or an upwards curve, or a downwards curve? Like we can see, okay, what on earth is the animal doing, right? Because if we have the starting points and ending points in math, you can say, okay, does the curve go down? Does it go up? Does it stay the same? Right? And as we said, evolution says that it has to go up. Okay, because that's what evolution has said about itself, because they said survival of the fittest. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, hopefully I didn't lose anyone quite yet. Alrighty, so the key thing, that's why I have a little asterisk next to it, it's a star, right? I couldn't find a star shape. Okay, the differences between them is what's important. So, for the ape to the man, right, the differences are what changes, right? What I mean is, the features of the ape that change, that's where everything happens. For example, a small neck giraffe to a large neck giraffe, right? Or a long neck giraffe, or a gazelle, right? Because they said gazelles evolved into giraffes over however many years, they say, like a couple million, right? So we start at the gazelle, and then we move to the giraffe. And we say, okay, what does the gazelle have? Well, the gazelle is fast, it's agile, it has herds, it has more kids than giraffes, because giraffes don't have that many kids. Gazelles have way more kids than giraffes. They reproduce way quicker. And then we say giraffes. Well, they're bigger. They can, kick a lion to death. They can reach up into trees with their long necks. We say, okay, we compare them, right? Because they will always try to get you to say, okay, the giraffe versus the short-necked giraffe, which is better, right? That's what they'll put. No, sorry, I won't say that because that will end up losing. Basically, what I'm saying is, does the intermediate change, or do the changes that happen to this animal to get from point A to point B make the animal better or worse? All right? Now, I'll walk through one example for you, because it probably doesn't make sense unless I walk through it. Okay, walk through it once. Transition. So a fish getting legs to turn into an amphibian, because evolution said that fish turn into amphibians. So we say, okay, well, they need legs because frogs have legs, right? Okay, so the transition is either new legs came into existence, they popped out of the fish somewhere, or the fins turned into legs, right? There is no definitive answer in science. They have not said either way, right? They're still on the fence about this. Basically, what evolutionists say is that fish somehow got legs, somehow, right? Because there are fish today with legs, right? So they'll say, obviously, the fish had to grow legs somehow. Okay, so the starting advantage. What's the starting advantage of fish? They can swim quick.
Gills.
Basically. Well, yeah, but we're going from fish to another fish, so gills don't matter. What we're doing is we're highlighting the differences. So we say, okay, the fish, well, it can swim quickly. That's its advantage, because it's aerodynamic or hydrodynamic or however you swim through the water faster. It's that, right? Now, what's the ending advantage? So starting means no legs, ending means legs, because that's the transition. Ending advantage, the fish can walk on land. Right, that's the advantage, right? The ending advantage, okay? So that's the change, okay? So somehow they have to get from swimming quickly to walking on land. That's what needs to happen.
But evolution only talks about those endpoints. They don't
Yeah.
talk about it.
So the thing they'll try to trick you on is they'll say, okay, legs give an advantage, right? They'll say legs help you walk on land to escape predators. That's actually what they've said in several textbooks. They've said, fish basically escape predators by being able to jump on land, wait for the predator to leave, and then go back. I'm not kidding, right? You can look it up. I think it's probably fallen out of favor because they change their minds on things so quickly nowadays. It's crazy, but you'll find it somewhere. I watched a documentary about it, right? That they have some kind of advantage for their legs, right? They'll say that. You know what that assumes? The legs are finished. The legs work. Because does evolution happen overnight or take thousands and millions of years? Millions of years. So do the legs work right away? Or are they kind of flopping around because they're not done yet? They're flopping around, right? So what I'm getting at is, okay, does the change of the fish growing legs from start to finish make the animal better or worse? Okay, so let's, and here's the example. Okay, we start with fish number 0. Okay, fish number 0 has no legs, okay? But it has a baby fish, and this baby fish has kind of little stubby legs, right? It has little things that are coming out the side. They don't have fingers, they don't have anything. They just have little stubs, right? Because evolution takes a long time. Okay, so we say fish, and then fish 0, and then fish 1. Okay, fish 1 has little stubbies, okay? little stubbies in water create drag, right? Do you put a bunch of weird poles out of planes? Do you have a bunch of weird bumps on planes? Or are they smooth? They're aerodynamic. They're smooth. Why? Because they travel through the air faster. Or they have less drag and they use less fuel, right? Mythbusters did some kind of weird experiment where they put dimples in a car and it actually made it better, right? Point is, science says that having things that slow you down is not good. That's why we don't have a bunch of weird, jut out little weird things on our planes and our trains and our cars. We don't. They're aerodynamic, right? Fish, same way. So what happens to fish number 1, because it has little stubbies? Is it faster or slower than fish number 0? Slower. Or maybe the evolutionist can say, well, actually, it wouldn't make any difference. Okay, so let's assume, Mr. Evolutionist, that it makes no difference. So we have fish number 1, who has little stubbies, and fish number 2 that has bigger stubbies. Okay, because they're not legs yet, because evolution takes forever, right? What's can swim faster, right? Fish number 1 or fish number 2? 1. Or if they say, it doesn't matter, you see the trend. Eventually, they'll have to say, okay, the flopping like arms behind them when they're swimming, right? At some point, they has to create drag. They're scientists. If they don't admit that, then they should just quit, because everyone knows that if I take you, throw you in a lake, and say, okay, you can either have a swimsuit on, or I can put on a fireman's coat. Who's going to be faster? The person with the swimsuit or the person with the fireman's coat? Swimsuit. Why? Because it's not dragging in the water, right? Same concept. So, does the fish get better or worse initially, right, when it starts to develop legs? Worse, because the fish has a disadvantage, drag, or flopping arms, right? Flopping arms and legs. And do they work yet? No, so there is no advantage. So they have a minus, but no plus. So that means it is objectively worse than before. Does that make sense? What does survival of the fittest say? So what survives? The fish with no legs or the fish with half-developed legs? No legs. Wow, isn't that interesting? So if survival of the fittest was true, which it is, because we see it in nature, should we ever have fish with legs? No. Here's your visual cue. All right, so we have the fish, and it has little jutties, like little things that stick out the side, not quite arms yet. It gets a little worse, not a lot worse, right? And as it is developing these legs, and they get bigger and bigger, and they create more drag, right? It gets worse and worse and worse. At the bottom, maybe its legs start to work for something. Maybe they can kind of half flop on land, right? Maybe they can get a little better at walking on land. Yeah, they kick their little legs somehow, right? Whatever they're saying. So maybe it starts to get a little better and a little better and a little better until they actually have functioning legs, right? You see why the curve is this way. Because it gets worse, 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 and then it somehow starts to work. We don't know when that is, but then it starts to get better after that. But here's the kicker. Would this fish survive? Would this fish survive? Would this fish survive? No. Why? Because they are worse than the ones that came before it. So the kids would be lunch. Because they're mutant kids. They have something wrong with them, right? Yeah, they'd be the slowest fish in the school, and the barracuda would say, ooh, nummy, right?
What they say when the bear, you don't have to be the fastest person, you just
Yep.
have to be faster than one person.
Yep, you just have to be faster. You just have to be faster than one person, because that last person is what the bear will get. Because in nature, who does the lion attack? Does the lion attack the super strong water buffalo that's in its prime, that's as strong as it can be? Or does it attack the sickly old buffalo? Or the sickly old water buffalo, right? Or does it attack the young, not strong, weak children water buffalo, or the strong male buffalo? The children, the weak. Why? Because the weak always die. Survival of the fittest. Right? Everyone agrees. Both Christians, evolutionists, atheists, Muslims, Hindus, everyone agrees. Why? Because it's science. Okay? But how would fish ever get legs then? Because it would get worse before it would get better. That's the point. It won't. Evolution disagrees with survival of the fittest. Why? Because they say legs have to happen. How do these things all survive? They wouldn't. They'd get eaten. That's the process. Do you guys get the process now? Alrighty. We'll test and see if you guys actually know. Okay, so giraffe. So this is another one I'll walk through for you. All right, so giraffe. The transition from a giraffe is from a short neck gazelle type looking thing to a giraffe, a long neck giraffe. But basically the change that they'll say is short neck to long neck, right? Okay, so the starting advantages of like the gazelle or tiny giraffe, right? Well, it's small, which means it doesn't have to eat as much. It's quicker. They are in herds, so the fast gazelles are not the ones that die. The slow gazelles are the ones that die. So that's an advantage, right? Being in a herd, that means you're less likely to be killed because they'll kill the old sickly gazelle, not the young healthy ones, right? And then the giraffe can reach high branches. It has a super long neck, so it can smack the other males as hard as it can, or it can see predators from far away and escape, right? Because they're so high they can see the lion from a long ways off, right? These are advantages that they will put in your textbooks, right? Those are the advantages they say. Okay, now let's walk through the process. Okay, but first we need to know the changes. What are all the changes that need to happen for the giraffe to have a long neck? Okay, so let me just tell you a little story named Joey the giraffe. Okay, Joey the giraffe. Okay, he wasn't a giraffe yet. He was a half giraffe, right? So he didn't have a long neck. He had a short neck. But Joey said, okay, I want to develop a long neck. So he tells his grandchildren, and all the grandchildren, right? He says, okay, you need to try your very hardest to get a long neck. Okay, so eventually the giraffe gets a long neck, and then it reaches up as high as it can to reach the leaves, and it passes out and dies. Well, all the giraffes congregate, and they're like, okay, what happened? Why did he die? Well, it turns out to get blood all the way up your neck, the giraffe has a 2-foot long heart. 2 feet long. Crazy. Okay, 2 feet. That's just its length. I don't know its width, but probably crazy. I mean, like, yay big, right? Crazy. Okay? They say, okay. So we need to change that. Okay, so the next time we make a long neck, we have to make a large heart in a long neck. Okay, so they make a large heart and a long neck. This 2-foot long heart's getting blood all the way up to the trees, and they're like, I'm living life, right? But then they decide, okay, I'm thirsty, right? So they bend down to drink out of this river, and their 2-foot long heart is going kaboom, kaboom, and its brains get blown out. The pressure from its heart is so great, the giraffe's brains exploded. Okay? Poor Joey the giraffe, right? He tried to evolve, he died again.
And that's what would really happen.
That's what would really happen, right?
So there's no way it would all evolve at once together in slow steps.
Correct, but I have to finish my story. Don't. So, yes, no spoilers. Okay, so 2-foot long heart. So all the giraffes gather together and they say, oh, well, Joey died again. Again, okay, I got one name for the giraffe, okay? So, he died. Okay, why did he die? Well, it turns out that his blood pressure was so great in his brain because of his big heart that his head exploded. Okay, so you know what we need? We need to some way to stop the blood pressure in our brain from exploding our brains. You know what we need to do? We need to create valves in your neck, in your veins and arteries or veins to stop the blood pressure from getting too great in your brain and causing it to explode. Okay? So they said, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So these giraffes, they all get together, they all try really hard to evolve valves. So they all have 2-foot long heart, long neck, and valves now. So they're going up to the trees, they eat the trees, and they're like, this life is good. And they see the water, and they're like, I know I'm not going to explode my head because I have these valves in my neck. So it reaches its head down into the water, and it passes out, and then it drowns. Dang it. Right? Why? Well, it turns out if you have valves in your neck, and the blood can't go back to your heart and get oxygenated by your lungs, you pass out and die. Because it turns out lungs are important for something, right? Oxygenating your blood. So if all your blood can't go back to your heart, you're dead. Oops. So all the giraffes get together and they say, okay, what happened? Well, it turns out that we couldn't get blood back to our heart because we tried to stop the heart from exploding our brains, so now we have to have some solution to keep oxygen blood in our heads long enough so we don't pass out and die. So they get all together and they're like, well, we need to develop a wonder net in your brain that literally stores blood so you don't pass out and die the second you reach down your head, right? So, moral of the story, for a long neck in a giraffe to actually work, first, it would need to have a 2-foot long heart to pump blood all the way up to its brain. It would need to have valves in its neck to stop the blood pressure from exploding its brain, and it would need to have a wonder net in its brain to keep the blood in there long enough so it doesn't pass out, right? Because a blood choke is where they cut off the blood to your brain. You pass out relatively quickly, right? Science, no one disagrees, okay? So the moral of the story is that, right, in real world, when we're really arguing with an evolutionist, we just say the giraffe should never happen, because how the heck is it going to evolve all those things at once, right? But let's just assume they all did. Okay? Let's assume they all did. Okay? Does the immediate change make the animal better or worse? That's the big question. So, okay, this long neck. This long neck on a gazelle. Pretend the gazelle starts its neck growing a little bit. Right? So it's a long neck gazelle now. It looks kind of funky, right? Would it be better or worse than other gazelles?
Maybe a little better.
Maybe a little better, maybe a little worse. It depends. Did its body get bigger? Because, yeah, if its neck got longer and its body didn't, it would tip over, right? Because there'd be too much weight in the front. It couldn't run fast. It wouldn't all.
See predators for them.
It could see predators, but it would be slower. So, right? Maybe we don't know.
Maybe the girl gazelles like it.
Maybe the gazelles like it. Maybe they got a thing for long necks. Who knows? Okay? Maybe that's a thing. I don't know. Scientists think that that's the reason a long neck. That's the prevailing view right now. The most popular view of giraffe evolution is that their neck got longer because they could whack other males better. So let's take that assumption. We'll say, okay, the gazelle. How do gazelles compete with each other? Well, if you've ever seen deer or gazelles or any kind of horned animal, they lock their horns and they push. Whoever can push the other male back usually wins. That's how they compete. They don't smack each other with their heads. Okay, they don't do that. The horned animals don't do that. Okay, that'd be weird. Right, what's the point of having spears, like dozens of spears coming out of your head, if you're just going to smack them with the non-pointy parts? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so does a long neck help the gazelle if it's swinging its head around? If the other gazelle's like, I'm just going to put my head down and charge you, right? Who wins in a fight? A guy with a spear or a guy that is flailing a spear around like this? Right? Are you gonna win a fight if you're taking a spear and you're just whipping it back and forth and trying to whack them? No. What are spears used for? Thrusting, stabbing, right? Not clubbing. Okay? So who would win? The normal gazelles. The normal gazelles, not the weird swinging its head around gazelle, right?
But even if it physically gets worse, is there a way that it would get smarter to try to balance it out?
I mean, it can, but then we have to get into like how do animals know tactics? It's like Sun Tzu giraffe, the art of combat. I get where you're coming from, but at this point, it's... No, you're absolutely right. With humans, yes, that's one of their arguments for why humans are better, right? Because we say, oh, maybe we're not as strong as the apes, but we have guns. So, I mean, guns, overcome any difficulty, right? You have a big enough gun, it doesn't matter how tough the other animal is, right? That's why hunting's a thing, right? If you didn't have weapons for hunting, you'd be lunch. Okay, the bear doesn't care about your fists and your legs. The bear cares if you have a gun or a spear, right? That's what matters. Okay, enough of that fun stuff. That's later in the discussion. Alrighty, so the giraffe. Again, it would get worse before it would get better, right? Because gazelles, even if it got a little longer neck, that wouldn't give as much advantage. And if it got a little longer neck and a little longer neck and a little longer neck, it wouldn't be as fast. It couldn't reach up into trees because trees aren't like another foot off the ground, right? Point is, it would not be advantageous, or at least obviously better, right? You could make the argument that it wouldn't be obviously better.
It would die when its brain explodes.
It would die when its brain explodes. It would die when it passes out, or it would die when it passes out and drowns, right? Point is, it wouldn't be better until everything existed at one time. Until the heart, the 2-foot-long heart, the long neck, the valves in its neck, and the wonder net were all there at the same time. That's the only way the giraffe has a true advantage over any other animal, right? That's its advantage. But it doesn't get that until everything is there at once. So it gets worse before it gets better. So the question is, survival of the fittest says what? No giraffe. Giraffe should not exist. That's what survival of the fittest says. Okay? Now the scientists can disagree, but if you just say, okay, what's better? A gazelle or a gazelle with a little longer neck? You walk them through the process. Because at some point, They will say, okay, the gazelle now has a giraffe neck. Oh, cool, the giraffe tips over because it doesn't have any weight in its back, right? Or it explodes, or it passes out, and drowns. Point is, it does not have a true advantage until everything is there. And not everything can be there at one time. It gets worse before it gets better. Same curve. It's the same curve. It does not straight up. It's not Empire State Building. It's like go under the city and then go up now, right? Now, this is one I'll have you guys try help with. Okay, lizard to bird. And a lizard evolves into a bird. Okay, that's what evolutionists say. Archaeopteryx, a dinosaur with feathers, right? So, the starting advantages of a lizard. Lizards are strong, they're cold-blooded, they're scaly and have rough skin, which means they're tougher skin, they have strong bones, and they're muscular, right? We're talking about dinosaurs. Okay? The bird has flight, warm-blooded, feathered, hollow bones, and has small, fast-twitch muscles, right? So, I'm not gonna tell you now. So when we have the lizard turning into the bird, okay, and these are all the changes that need to have happen. We need to get cold-blooded to warm-blooded. We need to get scaly skin to feathered skin. We need to get strong bones to hollow bones. And we need to get muscular to fast-twitch muscles. Okay, and this is evolution, which takes millions of years, and it doesn't happen all at once.
You can be muscular and still have fast twitch muscles.
True, but for the sake of argument, the density and also composition of the bird muscles are way different than that of lizards. So you're right, absolutely right. But for the sake of argument, I'm going to compare like a dinosaur and a finch, right? So we can get rid of that, right? If that's distracting, just get rid of that. It doesn't matter for this example. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to cold-blooded, and I want you to pay attention to feathers. Okay, what do feathers do for animals? Right? Feathers have two main advantages for animals. Keep them warm and help them fly. Because feathers have two purposes, warmth and flight. Now, pretend there actually was a dinosaur that had feathers. Would the dinosaur with feathers be better or worse than a dinosaur without feathers?
Worse.
Why? Why is it worse?
Because they don't need them. Why would they need them?
They don't need them, true, but that's not a disadvantage or an advantage, right? So a scientist could say, well, it's neutral, so therefore it could hypothetically be kept, right?
Oh, I'd call it an advantage because if feathers create lift, it create like for the velociraptor.
Mm-hmm.
Some scientists say the velociraptor had feathers, and that's what gave it its initial speed. Is because the feather would create lift, allowing that dinosaur to be lighter in terms and run faster on land, allowing it to catch its prey.
True, feathers could create lift. But for us experiment, we'll stick you with as many feathers as we can physically put on you. Will you be faster? Exactly, right? Maybe the velociraptor was faster, but is that advantage a really big advantage or even a discernible one? Do we really know if it's a good advantage or not? I would argue no. So yeah, the scientists could be right, but they're distracting you from the real concern. Okay, the real concern is this word right here, cold-blooded. Okay, so feathers, cold-blooded.
The feathers will take up all the sunlight, making their blood really cold, and then they'll pass out and go into hibernation, or whatever the lizards do.
Okay, so all reptiles are cold-blooded. So what do the feathers do?
What's the point in keeping in heat when you can't make it?
Feathers insulate. They keep in heat. You're right. So, question. Every reptile that is cold-blooded, does it have feathers right now in the world? No. Why? The skin, if you have a lizard, if you have a turtle, exactly right. You need a heat lamp, and they have skin, they sit on a rock or under the heat lamp to actually warm up to move.
Then they can move fast.
Then they can move.
If they're cold, they can't move.
Exactly, right? Even if you have, like if you've ever been in like fall and you've seen insects are also cold-blooded. Flies move slower when it's colder outside because they're not warmed up from their environment. Same concept. But what do feathers do? What were the two purposes of feathers again? Yep, it helps with flight and insulates, right? It keeps in heat and insulates. Okay, Cold-blooded creatures don't produce their own heat. So what heat are they keeping in? They're not keeping anything in, right? You'll often see in these documentaries these feathered dinosaurs in a cold environment. I laugh. Why? Because you take a snake and put it in the Arctic, what happens to the snake?
Popsicle.
The snake can't produce its own heat. It doesn't have a high enough metabolism to do so, right?
I have a question. You said that the feathers wouldn't keep it in any heat because it doesn't produce heat, but what if it got sunlight through it through the feathers? Would it keep that heat?
True, it could keep its heat for longer, but there's also a humongous disadvantage. Pretend for a moment that I take a glass of water or a pot of water and I put it in an insulation DoorDash bag. Okay? Now, my goal to make this water boil, that's my goal. Does the insulating DoorDash bag help or hurt them? Hurt.
It can't absorb as much.
Exactly. So the lizard or the dinosaur, having feathers, it couldn't warm up really quickly in the morning. And what happens when all the dinosaurs around, they're all kind of chilling, doing their dinosaur things, and they see the one dinosaur with feathers sitting there on the ground cold, not moving? Ooh, nummy. Wow, he can't move yet. That's unfortunate.
Maybe it's lukewarm.
Yeah, maybe it's lukewarm. Maybe he's just moving in slow motion. Who knows?
Maybe it's not. Maybe he's a halfsy, like not cold, not warm, just.
Just right.
It's not just right.
Point is, cold-blooded with feathers, that's a disadvantage. Okay, because if you're heavy, if you're a velociraptor, or if you're a big dinosaur, I don't care how many feathers I put on you, you're not going to fly. Just like you, if I put enough feathers on you, you're not going to fly. Why? What do birds have? Hollow bones. They don't have solid bones, right? They're very light. If you ever picked up a bird, it's incredible how light they are. That's how they fly. A combination between feathers, lightness, hollow bones, and the interlocking of their feathers, right? That's how birds fly. So the dinosaur wouldn't get any advantages from feathers, right? Well, let's take a different example. Let's say the lizard changed its front legs. So let's say that, hey, this dinosaur didn't have feathers, but it started to turn its two front legs into wings, right? So its two front legs started hollowing out its bones and changing its muscle structure. Okay, would that be an advantage or disadvantage for the lizard?
Disadvantage.
Why? Yeah, poor thing would be like have its face smashed into the ground and be a wheelbarrow because it couldn't lift itself up because it has tiny little arms.
The disabled thing.
It'd be a disabled lizard. Right, and what happens when the one lizard can't walk or run properly? What do all the other lizards think? Yummy. Or like, yeah, the hawks say lunch, right? Point is, they are what? Better or worse? Worse. Let's try a different one. Let's try muscular. Let's try say that instead of their two front legs, let's say their entire being, they started hollowing out their bones. Would the lizard with hollow bones be better or worse than regular lizards? Worse. Why? Yeah, the muscles would be too strong for the bones. Do you know why? Okay, certain athletes, when they're on steroids, they snap their bones. Because their muscles are so big, they pull on their bones and their bones snap. Same thing would happen to a reptile if they hollowed out their bones. Right? So, would we ever get birds if survival of the fittest is true? Absolutely not. That's ridiculous. Okay, this is the one I find the funniest. Because dinosaurs with feathers is the most funny thing. Because you're taking a cold-blooded animal who needs to heat it from the sun and you're insulating it. You say to the scientist, point out one reptile today that has feathers. I'll wait. Mr. Scientist, why don't they have feathers? Oh, well, you see, because they're cold-blooded and they need scaly... Because they'd be worse. Right? Don't think about the bird versus the lizard. Think about the lizard turning into a bird. They'll trick you by saying bird better than lizard because bird can fly. Bird can escape lizard. Okay? Problem is that in between, not A, not C, but B. B is where evolution fails. The in between, that's where evolution fails. That's where survival of the fittest disagrees with evolution. All right? Because when we look at this graph, right, this curve, because it's another similar curve, right? You'll see a trend. Same curve. The lizard and the bird are kind of the same, right? They kind of both have their own advantages and disadvantages. But in the middle, they're all worse, right? If you have a bird that's heavier and can't fly as well, is it better than a bird that can fly really well? No. If you have a lizard who's weaker than a regular lizard, is it going to survive as much? No. You guys starting to see the vision here. You can use this process with any transition, any feature, anything in evolution. Okay, next example. Ape to human. Okay, this is a fun one. Okay, ape to human. Starting advantages. The ape is resilient, tough, strong, it has fur and hair, and can swing through trees. Right? Those are the advantages we're going to focus on. Okay, the ending advantages. Humans are smart and we can run on 2 legs. Okay? Objectively, who's better, human or ape? Ape. Ape is better? Hold on. What's better, ape or humans?
Well, apes can run faster, they're stronger,
They can
True.
beat us in a fight pretty easily.
Yeah,
they
but
can
our
climb
guns.
trees.
Yeah,
guns
but
take 'em out.
if we come in with like a tank,
At that point, we didn't have guns.
true, we didn't have, don't get ahead of me. Don't spoil, no spoilers.
We had
Okay?
guns.
You're right, but no spoilers, okay? You're right, but no spoilers. Okay. So, we have ape to human. So, again, we'll do our process of ape plus 0. Okay? So we have ape plus 0, or ape, the first ape, and he's going to start turning into a human now. Okay, ape 1. Let's say ape 1 got a little smarter than ape 0. Who's better, ape 1 or ape 0? Ape 1. This time 1 is better. Okay, we say, okay, ape 1's better. Well, that's different. Okay, so ape 1 is a little smarter than ape 0. What about ape 2? Well, ape 2 is a little bit smarter than ape 1. Who's better? Ape 2, correct. Ape 3, ape 4, so on. Question. Will that ape, who gets smarter and smarter and smarter, ever end up as human? Why?
It'll be a smart ape.
Smart ape. Yeah, he's not walking on 2 legs. He's a smart ape. He didn't give up any of his strength. He didn't give up any of his fur and hair, and he didn't give up any of his four-leggedness, right? Am I running out of time, or? No? Okay, Blade's just topping in. Hi, Blade. So, the ape whatever, 1,627, is now a human. Human levels of intelligence ape. Does a human exist yet? No. He's just a smart ape. Has anyone ever seen Planet of the Apes? Okay. Planet of the Apes. Imagine who would win in a fight, a regular human or a human with ape strength? Yeah. Has anyone ever seen a chimpanzee fighting with a person? A chimpanzee can grab you and manhandle you, even though it's like way smaller than you. Okay, now imagine a gorilla. It could pick up and throw you.
One punch man.
Yeah, he would just grab you. In Star Wars, you'd be like Chewbacca, rip the arms right off the stormtrooper, right? They didn't actually show that, but they implied it. They didn't actually have that in. He just implied it. Okay, beside the point. Okay, ape strength plus human intelligence, you would never arrive at humans. Okay. Now let's pretend that, okay, well, that didn't work. We didn't arrive at humans. So obviously we need to change the way we approach things. Okay. So 8 plus 0. We'll start it again. 8 plus 0, 8 plus 1. So now we know that we have to get to humans. Okay, so humans are weaker than apes. So ape 1 will be weaker than ape 0. Who's better? Ape 0. Interesting. Okay, now we go down, right? You guys starting to see the trend again. Okay. Let's pretend that we have ape 1,607, and now he's as weak as a human. Okay? Now, we have ape 1,607. Now he starts to get smarter. What's better, ape 1,607 or ape whatever? I'm not even going to say that. New ape 0 or new ape 1? New ape. But no, we're only comparing the initial and the next. Right? So now we're at the bottom of the curve. Right? I'm spoiling it for you now. He lost all his strength. He's already at the bottom of the curve, right? Poor, weak, dumb ape. Right? A lemur, maybe. Who knows? Right? Weak, dumb ape. Okay, now he starts to get intelligence, because now we arrived at human levels of intelligence, or human levels of strength. Now we have to go up to human levels of intelligence. So right, we have ape 0, or new ape 0, and new ape 1. New ape 1 is a little smarter than new ape plus 0. Right? Who's better? New ape 1. Right, now that curve starts to go up. You guys seeing the trend again, right? So here's the cool thing. There's 2 options with ape to human. One of them is Planet of the Apes. Okay? Planet of the Apes get smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter, and humans go extinct. Okay, in the movie it's a different reason, but, right? If apes were as smart as humans, they would kick our butts. Why? Because if you get a big ape who's as intelligent, they're stronger than you, so they could carry a ton of armor on themselves. They could essentially become bulletproof. That's the problem with humans right now, is we're not strong enough to actually have Iron Man suits. Exosuits, right? There's a documentary at one point, right?
That's a big problem.
Yeah, it's point is, the ape, if it just got smarter and it never got weaker, would never arrive at humans. Is evolution true or false then? False. Okay, new. Okay, the other option, ape to man. Let's say that the ape got weaker and then it got smarter, right? Is evolution true or false with that curve? False. Why?
It'd be survival of the weakest.
It'd be survival of the weakest. Would this ape exist? Would this ape exist? Exactly. Right? You guys starting to get the vision? This is why this is so cool, because if you think about the in-betweens kill evolution. But they never talk about the in-betweens. They talk about the ape and the human, or the ape, Neanderthal, and human. Right? Because they said the Neanderthal was strong, but it was smart enough where it could use weapons. You skipped an entire part where apes were not eating rotten fruit, but didn't know how to make weapons yet. You skipped a part. Right? That's what they'll try to trick you on. Okay? Or maybe you say, okay, maybe they increased intelligence first. Maybe the ape was super intelligent, right? But then we have to get the humans, though. Okay, so what do we have to do? If we're at the top of this graph right now, if we have an ape with human intelligence, you have to decrease in strength, don't you, to get to humans? Okay, who would win, the top of this graph or starting to go down this way? The top, because it's better. Okay, that's the problem with evolution. Okay, now we get to my favorite example. Okay, the caterpillar. Okay, now transition between caterpillar is caterpillar to butterfly, right? Because evolution takes millions of years, so the caterpillar had to exist before the butterfly, right? Common sense. Alrighty. Starting advantages of the caterpillar. It can camouflage itself. It tastes bad. It can walk on legs and eat leaves. That's kind of what a caterpillar does. Okay? Butterfly. Camouflage itself. It also tastes bad. Monarchs are poisonous. I don't know if you knew that. We raise monarchs from time to time. They fly and then they eat nectar. Okay? So, does the immediate change between the caterpillar to the butterfly make the animal better or worse?
Wait, you mean it just hops from caterpillar to butterfly?
Yep. Moving from caterpillar to butterfly. It'd make it better. Yeah. Except I'm missing a stage, aren't I? What comes between a caterpillar and a butterfly? Chrysalis. Correct. What do chrysalises do?
A big sack of juice.
Well,
It's a
do caterpillars reproduce?
yeah. Do caterpillars lay eggs? No, they do not. What lays eggs? Caterpillars or butterflies? That's a problem.
Butterflies don't make butterflies either.
They don't? Butterflies, yeah, so if butterflies came first, how would that work? Pretend a butterfly evolved for a little thought experiment. We say, okay, butterfly evolved first. Okay, cool. You know what? Instead of having butterfly babies, we're gonna have a mutation that creates caterpillar babies. Is the new butterfly caterpillar weird thing, is that better or worse? Worse.
It's a butterfly that can't fly.
It's a butterfly that can't fly and it turns into a chrysalis, which a chrysalis, as you know, does nothing. If you wanna make an evolutionist angry, just bring up caterpillars, honestly, because it's hilarious. And here's why. Right? We'll skip the graph. I'll have my own little story. The very hungry caterpillar. Oh, yes.
Well, I had one thing to add on to that. After a butterfly even hatches out of its chrysalis, even if it happened in like 1 second, they're still sitting there and pumping blood to their wings for hours. They can't fly yet. They're just sitting there.
True. They do.
Even if they were a sack of juice for 1 second, they turn into a butterfly, they're still dead.
True. They would be. Right? Caterpillars. So let's suppose the modern caterpillar evolved over 100,000 years, but caterpillars don't mate or lay eggs. Oops. Is evolution true or false?
False.
Oopsie daisy. That's one old caterpillar. Because obviously he can't die, because the second the caterpillar dies, the species goes extinct, because it can't make caterpillar babies. Okay? Caterpillars somehow, let's assume that caterpillars somehow developed without reproducing, though. Let's assume that. Let's just give them that, okay? let's assume that caterpillars developed a chrysalis over 100,000 years, because remember, evolution takes a long time. So it's trying to create itself into a chrysalis for 100,000 years. A chrysalis literally turns a caterpillar into a slushy. If you ever look at documentaries, they literally turn into like organic soup. I don't know how they do it. But however they do it, right? It literally turns into an organic soup, a slushy. Yeah, I maybe a little graphic here, but if you take a chrysalis and you cut it, right, in the middle of the stage, it'll just drip out. It's just a bunch of guts. That's nasty, right? Caterpillar slushy. Can a caterpillar slushy do anything? No. Caterpillar slushies can't reproduce. Oops. Can't reproduce, can't eat, can't do anything. So that intermediate form, that would be kind of stupid, wouldn't it? Okay, let's assume it somehow got there, though. The butterfly somehow develops against all odds. It doesn't know how to fly, though, because it's a caterpillar. That's a bummer. It was just walking around. It's like, what do I do with these wing things? I've never flown before.
They show everyone where to eat me.
What's that?
That's my camouflage.
Yeah, maybe it's a camouflage or something, right? It's a bummer. Here's the thing about butterflies. Butterflies don't eat leaves. So how the heck would it know to eat nectar? It was a caterpillar for 100,000 years. Then it was a caterpillar slushy for another 100,000 years. So how did it know to eat nectar? Kind of weird. Caterpillar would die. The butterfly would die of starvation, right? It does. Remember, over 100,000 years, the caterpillar develops into a butterfly, right? When does it figure out that its proboscis little thing is made for nectar? Oh, it'll starve to death about 20, 30 times before it figures it out, right? Or something stupid like that. Point is, it doesn't make any sense, right? And the butterflies still can't reproduce. Why? Because there's no other butterflies. There's only one butterfly, the first butterfly. Who's the butterfly going to reproduce with? A caterpillar? Where's it going to come from? Where are the butterfly babies going to come from? That's a problem. That's a huge problem. There's like 20 problems we just went through, right? And that's not even counting the curve in survival of the fittest. Okay? If you ever want to pick on an atheist or evolutionist, you always bring up caterpillars. How does a butterfly evolve? If they start with a butterfly, they lose. Why? Because the butterfly has to have caterpillar babies at some point. The caterpillar babies have to somehow turn into a chrysalis. And that chrysalis has to somehow turn back into a butterfly. Where in nature does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. It's not advantageous. It's not beneficial for the butterfly to have caterpillar babies. It really isn't. It isn't beneficial for a caterpillar to become a chrysalis either. Any way they choose to start, they always end up losing. The only way the butterfly and caterpillar actually survive and reproduce and create a species is if they have everything at once from the beginning. That's not evolution.
Doesn't sound like mutation.
It doesn't sound like small changes over millions of years, right? I don't care what mutation you have, it doesn't work.
It still wouldn't be advantageous because even if the butterfly is better than the caterpillar, it's making caterpillar babies, so it's
True. It's still not making butterfly babies, right? You'll probably have to start all over again. Point is, caterpillar destroys evolution by itself.
It's interesting because Genesis says that everything reproduced after its own kind. And when you think about butterflies, I mean, God must think that a butterfly and a caterpillar are the same kind, right?
Well, genetically they are.
And isn't that interesting? Like, you think it's one of the few things that does that.
Oh, insects are fascinating. The insect world is crazy. You want to find things that make evolutionists turn on their head? Just look at insects for a couple minutes. Crazy things. I mean, insects are the weirdest, right? Absolutely weird. Yeah.
Got one thing is the queen ant, after she finds a place where she wants to chill and make a colony, she'll tear off her wings. Why?
That's a really good question. Why would it tear off its wings?
No reason. She keep
Maybe the queen ant got really sad and depressed and it wanted to feel something. Yeah, it's a bit morbid, right? But at the same time, like now that you know the process, you can think about whatever you want. Anything in the animal kingdom falls if you just think about it with a thought process. Okay, so let's try to think of a few right now.
Bacteria going from splitting to asexual, right?
Oh, sexual to asexual. Correct. Asexual to sexual. Sure. Bacteria, how do they reproduce? Most bacteria reproduce by just splitting apart. So you know what? Instead of splitting apart, here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend the next 100,000 generations developing a new process that needs a male and a female to reproduce. I'm going to spend 100,000 years. See, here's the bummer. Once you have that process in place, who are you going to reproduce with? All the other bacteria just split apart. They're not male or female. How does the bacteria, what does the male or female bacteria produce with? Right? There's that. Think of another example. There's thousands of them. Bats, echolocation. Yeah. So you know what we're going to do? I can't see. Bats can't really see in the dark that well. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to develop echolocation so I can actually see in the dark. So I'm going to scream or make these weird noises, and I'm going to somehow know where everything is at. Turns out I don't have the ears or the brain to actually know what actually echolocation bounces tell me. So I'm just going to fly right into a wall and kill myself.
Well, before it became blind, couldn't it see well?
Probably. Yeah, maybe bats were just. Maybe a mouse was flying in the daytime. Maybe a prehistoric flying mouse.
With feathers.
With feathers,
That
right?
makes sense. It'd be advantages, and then it'd be downhill because then it lays at night, which would be less predators. It eats flying creatures instead of grains, which are, I think, around the same common, but it'd be harder. Because, I mean, seeds are everywhere for a mouse.
Yeah. Or another one, bees. How did bees happen? Bees are kind of the same thing as butterflies. Okay, bees start out as like little larva things, and then they grow into bees, right? But they have stingers, right? So imagine the first bee with the stinger. It's like, I have a stinger, and the only reason I would actually keep this stinger is if it's useful, and it helps me do something. Well, here's the funny thing about bees with stingers. What happens when they sting something?
They die.
Wow. So what advantage does the bee have exactly? None, because it's a suicide bomber bee. It's a kamikaze bee. The first bee would kill itself. That's weird. There's dozens of examples. And you guys can think of more examples than I can.
Wasn't the honeybee, wasn't that not able to fly? Or shouldn't be able to? By science?
Well, that says science. The laws of aerodynamics
Yeah,
said that
but
the
then
bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly.
If they had like a little bit smaller wings, or they got a little more fat, they just die.
Pretty much. Scientists still kind of struggle with the fact of aerodynamics with the bumblebee. Anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about. We could talk about a lot more, but any questions, any thoughts, any new species that you can think of, any new transition that makes no sense.
How does sugar glider come to be?
What's that?
A sugar glider. 'Cause we were
And
talking
the little
about
flying squirrel things?
Yeah, you guys were talking about flying rats, and for a second I'm like, sugar glider.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's pretend that's a good one. So let's walk through this. So the sugar glider was just a regular squirrel-looking thing, right? And remember, since evolution takes forever, maybe it doesn't have like the flaps fully engaged. Maybe it has like little tiny skin pouches under its front legs. What advantage does that give?
Jump off of things.
None. Yeah, it would. Yeah. Yeah, I could fly. Splat. Right? No advantage. That's a good one. Right? When would it get its advantage? When it's fully developed. How long would that take, though, with evolution? Thousands, millions of years.
And it would slow it down so it couldn't climb trees as easily or escape from predators.
It wouldn't, if there was no advantage, why would it keep it? I don't even know how sloths exist, period. But for some reason, it's like we have some kind of ape-looking thing, and this ape-looking thing was just regular, and then it decided it really wanted to slow itself down in life.
It'd be super lazy and take a long time to digest.
Yeah, I don't exactly know why it would ever become slower. What advantage does being slower have? I can't think of one. Maybe its metabolism slows down? Maybe like all the food disappeared and like the slowest, most lazy animal survived? I don't know. Point is, like you guys are just pointing out, tons of examples. But it's ridiculous when you think about it, because survival of the fittest, the sloth shouldn't exist. The caterpillar shouldn't exist. The butterfly shouldn't exist. A human shouldn't exist. Smart apes should exist if survival of the fittest is true. Just goes to show that their formula actually destroys them. But they're not going to tell you that. right?
If survival of the fittest stayed for its entire time and went by its own rules, we'd just be a world of bacteria.
True, we'd be a world of humongous superbacteria. Yep. Why would bacteria ever, decide to be multicellular? Because it would help each other? Well, that's interesting. But like the cells that become a heart, what do? They just chill? The first cells that do nothing, or the first cells that are immune system. Immune system!
Yeah, because there's the suicide cells.
Yeah, the suicide cells. Yeah. That's not survival of the fittest. Yeah, some cells' entire purpose is to like stick themselves to a virus and then get killed by other cells. That's their entire purpose. Like, do you think they like that? Do you think that they had an advantage and somehow created that? No, that's ridiculous.
What happened before they learned what to attach to and they attached all
True. What if they attached to like the heart and then all the cells came and killed the heart cells? How would they know? That's another good one. Blood clotting cells. We're tired of like having a tiny pinprick and then bleeding out. We're going to develop something that clots our blood so we stop bleeding out. Well, all our blood congeals and then we just die. Yeah, it's just it doesn't know. Remember, it's the first of its kind. It doesn't know what it's supposed to do. It has no practice. It has no instincts. Right? It doesn't know. The firsts of everything is where the problems lie. So look at the firsts of everything. First organs, first lungs. Where'd the first lungs develop? In fish? Do fish need lungs?
No.
No, why? Yeah, you'd suffocate. Why would you need lungs if you have perfectly operational gills? Yeah, just dead. You're a dead fish is what you are. You're not a better fish, you're a dead fish.
Don't they say everything that's not an advantage goes away?
Yes.
So a lung that doesn't work would go away.
Whales.
What was that?
Whales.
Yeah, whales. Why would whales, if whales developed from, well, whales, they say, to get around the fact that whales breathe air, they have to actually say that fish became reptiles, that became amphibians, that became reptiles, that became mammals, and then mammals turned into like big hippo-looking things. These hippo things went back into the water to turn into whales. That's actually the process they use to actually describe whales, because they don't have any answer to how they breathe air.
And they use like vestigial legs.
Yeah, vestigial legs. They'll say, look, don't worry about survival of the fittest. Don't worry about any of the logic. They have a little bone in their body that they don't know where it came from. Therefore, the whale had to come from a mammal. Let's not forget the fact that, like, why the heck would a hippo jump in the river or jump in an ocean and then breathe in the ocean when it's a hippo? Why? No, that's stupid, right?
One more thing is, wouldn't the process just go back to it turning into a fish?
Yeah.
Well, what about
Maybe.
a hippo with no legs and just fins on land?
Yeah. Oh, a hippo before it developed fins, it would just bloop, and just sink and it'd die. It couldn't float.
The ocean, hold your breath for
Yeah.
8,000
Hippos don't swim. They kind of like bounce off the bottom, right? They walk on the bottom of the river. So what happens if the hippo goes into the river or the ocean? It finds a drop off and sinks to the bottom. That hippo's not evolving into a whale. It's a dead hippo, right? If you give any thought to these things and think about the firsts or the in-betweens, it all becomes ridiculous. Every single thing just becomes ridiculous. I mean, there's a couple things they can get away with, but not many. Remember, to destroy their process, all you need is one, right? Okay, so the question, anything that I said did not make sense or that you didn't really care that I said? Anything that didn't make sense or was kind of like confusing? Because this is the first time I presented it this way, so any feedback? It is one of my favorite topics to discuss because it just you can have fun with the caterpillar is my favorite, right? I want to save that one for last. It's so funny. Just makes no sense. Makes no sense.
You have to add the kamikaze bee and the hippo in the ocean.
The kamikaze bee in the hippo ocean. I can do that.
The bee, that's what
Yeah, the first stinger, right?
what does it do?
Let's try it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the stinger I just evolved. Let's test it. Oh, dead.
Wasn't it attached to their heart or like their liver or something like that?
No,
They
the
sting-
bee's stinger is like attached to their spine.
So
So when their stinger comes out, let's just say they're a very paralyzed bee for a little while. They slowly bleed to death or something. I don't know the science behind it. I just know they die.
There's like a hole at the bottom of the abdomen, and then just there's nothing left inside. So
Oof. That's awful. It like deflates. What's that? Yeah, the stinger is literally attached to its like innards.
like a plug.
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The entire thing is. But now you can cause some havoc. Find some of your friends and talk about some of these things. Cause some havoc. Get their gears turning in their heads. Don't have to be mean about it. Just say I don't understand this. Like I don't understand how a hippo can become a whale when it would just sink. It doesn't have flippers yet. If it has flippers on land before it goes into the water, it's a lunch hippo. Right? It's not going to run away from anything.
Gonna dry out and die.
Yeah, it's going to dry out and die if it is on land and it can't get back in the water because it has flippers instead of feet. Evolution happens slowly, and that destroys evolution. Because you can't miraculously create things out of thin air. Or the giraffe would blow its brains out. Right? How many times did the giraffe blow its brains out before it decided to evolve one of the 3 things it needs? Right?
I'm just shocked on how smart and psychic and animals are.
Oh, yeah.
Know what they have to change.
Yeah, the animals and all the stories that are told in your textbooks, the animals just know exactly how to evolve to get to the best, what we have today. Yeah, how would the hippo know to evolve into a whale?
Because it drowned and died.
Yeah, because it drowned and died, so it learned that it had to, it learned. It learned from its past reincarnation.
The other hippo saw it drown.
Yeah. The other hippos are like, wait a minute, this isn't good.
No, wait, the other hippos are like, oh, it's gone. I don't know where it went. They
No,
wouldn't
they're
learn.
smarter than that.
Oh, they're definitely smarter. Why would a hippo change though? They're like the meanest land animal. They can kill almost everything.
Their skin's toxic.
They're what?